This is a complete course on building native mobile applications without any code on Bubble.io. In this course, we are going to cover everything you need to know about native mobile applications in Bubble, from the very basics all the way to deploying your app on iOS and Android stores. This video is going to be helpful for two types of people. Type 1 is if you have never heard of Bubble.io before, you have never coded, you have never heard about any low-code, no-code tools. In this case, we are going to go all the way from the very basics. I'm going to introduce you to the Bubble.io editor, and then we are going to go step by step up until deploying the app to the stores. The second type of person is if you have already heard about Bubble.io before, and you have already built web apps with Bubble, and you're simply looking to learn the native mobile functionality released in 2024. And this is the plan for this video. You will see the same plan in the description of this video as well, so feel free to jump to timestamps on this video so that you look at the parts that are relevant to you. If you're a complete beginner though, I highly encourage you to watch the complete video from the very scratch. And if you already know Bubble, then I suggest to skip here, so to 4 types of mobile views. You'll see the exact timestamp below. Before we start though, I want to quickly introduce myself. My name is Mark Vasiliev and I run a Bubble.io product studio where we build apps for other people. And over the past year, we've built over 12 apps on Bubble.io. Some of them are in finance, some of them are edtech, so educational apps, some of them are in AI SaaS. And so I know all the tiny details and nuances when it comes to Bubble, and this is why I think I should be making this video for you to share how to build native mobile apps. Let's start. So first of all, let's talk about what is Bubble.io, and let me make myself full screen here. So essentially, Bubble is a platform that allows you to build any application without coding. And the way it works, it is almost like Photoshop, but for apps. So if you think about Photoshop, what Photoshop allows you to do is you take a picture, and then within its graphical interface, you're able to make adjustments to that picture. You're not touching the picture itself. You're not telling which pixel to change. You're applying something over the picture. So Photoshop is a level of abstraction, a tool that allows you to manipulate the image. The same is Bubble. Instead of coding, the Bubble allows us to write code without writing code. By using a drag and drop editor and by using buttons, we're essentially manipulating the code that is beneath our application. And the code in this case for native mobile apps is React Native. So essentially, we're using a drag and drop editor, but we are creating code. And this is important for you to understand what's really going beneath the app. It is very important to state though that it might seem simple to just drag elements and drop elements on the board. However, it's very important to make it right. Because the design of the application, the design of the database is where a lot of people can go wrong, and that is going to screw their app up. And so in this video, I'm going to try to make sure that you don't make those mistakes. Now, Bubble.io in 2024 have released a native mobile functionality, which allows you to build native mobile apps without any code. And this is the first tool of its kind. And this is why I'm making the video. By the time you're watching this video, you might have access to this beta. It might have been released to public, or it might be just in closed beta, in which case you should be signing up for the waiting list as soon as possible. But I think you will have access to it. So now that we have covered this, let's actually go ahead to Bubble and set our project up. So I'm going to head to Bubble.io. I'm going to create a new app, and I'm going to call it to-do list, because today we're going to be building a simple to-do list app. We're going to get started with the app. We're not going to select any template, start with basic features, and now Bubble is going to create our application. Okay, cool. So the app has been created. We are going to simply skip the application assistant because we don't need it. And we are in our editor. So to set up mobile, we are going to go to settings, mobile, and add mobile app. And just like this, we have set our mobile app up. What I will also do is I will go to versions and enable the redesigned workflow editor. This is a new feature that Bubble released, and this editor is going to become the standard soon. And so I'm going to make this tutorial with this editor because this is what most of you are going to be using by the time you're watching this video. And just like this, we have set up our Bubble project. So the next step for us is to get familiar with the Bubble editor and to understand what's going on here. So let's do just that. Over here, you have me, So I'm not a part of a Bubble editor, but this is your canvas and this is where you're going to be able to create your app. This is essentially how your app looks like. This is the main view. And as I click on it, you see this window pops up. This window is where you are going to be doing most of your work in Bubble.io when building your native mobile application. So this is the property editor. I'm going to be able to add some elements to the screen and edit them in this editor. Let's do just that. We're actually going to send this to not scrollable for now. Never mind what this means. I'm going to explain it later. And I'm going to simply, from here, I'm going to drag a text element onto here. So you see now we have a text in our mobile app, and I can edit this text within this property editor. So if I say, hello there, you see this text switches to just that. As in here, there are multiple things. We are going to get familiar with them throughout this tutorial. For example, I can center this text in the center of the screen. The next thing you need to know is actually these things, just completely ignore them. They're not too relevant for you. You can add some grades, but for this tutorial, not relevant. And if you click on to preview, this is going to allow you to see how your app functions in real time. So there we go. Now we have our super basic app with the basic text, hello there, created and built. The next thing is the workflow editor. Here, this is the place where you are going to be building the logic of your app. We're going to get back to this a little bit later. This is the database. We're going to get familiar with this later. And so here are different parts of your application that you're able to edit. And essentially, this is kind of the Bubble editor. You'll get familiar with it as we go through this tutorial. As the next step, let's get more familiar with visual elements in Bubble.io and styles. So let's go back to our application and let's now add another text just beneath the text above there. And let's say, welcome to my application. Exclamation mark. Cool. Now let's center this one as well, because why not? And let's say I want this text to be a little bit bigger. So what I can do now is I can go to this visual editor, I can find this thing here, which is 14px, which is the size of text. I'll set it to 18. You see, the text becomes bigger. If I want this text to be italic, this is where I would do this manipulation as well. And as obviously I can change the color of this text to whatever I want it to be. Now let's add another text below and let's say it is a cool day. And now actually, you know what? Now that I think about it, I want this text to have the same style as the text above it, because my app needs to have a unanimous branding. It needs to look nice. But what I realize now is that to do this, I would need to go here. I would need to change this to 18 pixels. I would need to change the color, and then I would need to make this text italic. And if I ever want to make a certain change to my application, then I would completely have to change every single text later on. This is the downside one of doing it this way. And that's downside number two is that the app is going to perform worse. So that's why styles exist in the Bubble.io application. So let's get familiar with them and let's actually learn how we should be building this from the scratch, from the get-go. First of all, hello there. You see, if you go to visual properties, you have this style panel here. And I can select it to be a heading. And this way, I select the style of heading. Now let's add those texts as we had those before. So this was welcome to my app. And the second one was, it is a nice day today. And now we're going to center these texts again. Just like this. And now instead of us going and editing these texts here, first of all, we see that the style of these texts is body. So we're going to click Edit Style, and this is going to bring us to the Styles tab, which has the element styles and the style variables. And now you see we are brought directly to the text body. I'll move myself. And so now over here, if we want to make our body, instead of 14 pixels, we want to make it 15 and change it over here, and we want to make it italic. And then I go back to our app. You see that these texts have already adopted. So whenever you're building your apps on Bubble, always use the style tabs as much as you can. Now I'll actually reset these back to the default. Next are style variables. Over here, what you need to know is before starting your project, this is where you select the font of your app, which is over here. So right now it's Open Sans and our app looks like this. Now let me actually change this. Let me actually change this to Inter because I prefer Inter for this project. And if I go back, you see all of the fonts in my application have changed. Next are the style variables. I always misclick. Here we have the colors of our application. Our primary color, this is the main color of our app. And to illustrate, all of the things that are highlighted as the main actions are going to be of that color. So if I add a button now, so I'll take a button, I'll drag and drop it. You see it's blue and you see its default color is set to primary. So if you click on colors, you see their color variables and they're located over here. And they look exactly the same as element styles. So if I now go to the styles tab and decide to change my color to a purple color or like this light pinkish purple color, you'll see that the button changes, but also all of the elements within my application will change. This was the styles tab. Get familiar with it, use it to build your visual interfaces in the application. So now that we have that covered, one more final thing that we need before our app is the database. Right now, we're able to create all these visual elements such as text. You can even add an icon, and we can do a lot of things. But an app is only an app if it has some certain functionality that it does. A static, like an app that you open and has the same information, is not really useful to the user. So we need to make it functional. And the way this works is with databases. Let me quickly make myself bigger so that I can explain you what databases are. So an app really consists of 2.5 parts. First part is the visual interface. This is what the user sees. This is what we are building. And the second part is the database. The database stores all the data for the application. So it stores what users have signed up. It stores what things can happen in the app. So if a user signs up and he creates some elements in the application, so in our case, we're building a to-do list. A to-do list will have items, right? So for example, an item could be go to a grocery store, work out, clean the floor. And a user is going to be able to create all of those items, and we need to store them somewhere so that we remember that he created them. And that's what we store in the database. And the final thing, the and a half thing, because I said that it's 2.5 things, is the connection between the interface and the database. User sees the pretty interface. Now this connection is going to pull things from the database and display them. So if a user needed to clean the floor, go to gym, and go to a grocery store, this connection is going to pull those things from the database and display those things to the user. And this connection as well is what's responsible of performing actions within your app. So if the user wants to add certain things to the database, he's going to do some action, which is going to create the thing in the database. The action is going to pull the thing from the database. The action can modify the thing in the database. And these actions, this is essentially how any application ever works. If you understand these 2.5 parts, you understand every app ever created. If this sounds way too theoretical to you, no worries. I'm going to show you an example right now. So let's do just that. Let's actually design our database for the to-do list app. To do this, I'll jump onto this beautiful FigJam board to understand all of the concepts. And the first database that is default in Babel, if I go here, is user. This is the only mandatory and default database. A user is every person who uses your application and he can either be logged in or logged out. And every user has basically an email, and every other data type is going to have modified date, created date, and Slack. Just generally ignore those. The email is the default field for the user. So let's put an email here and just email, right? So next, what should users of our to-do list app have? When they sign up, it would probably be cool if we collect their first and last name. So we're going to create a field which is called first, and then the type of this field. So what is the type of the data that we're storing is going to be text, because every user's name is going to be text, right? And I'm going to get to types a bit later as well. And then basically his last name is going to be stored as last and text. So now for every user that signs up to our application, we're going to ask them what's your name. They're going to put their name and we're going to know their name. So then instead of saying hello there when they log in, we can say hello Mark. Cool. And so now we need to build our basic functionality of our application. And for that, users will need to create the to-do list items. So let's create a new type of object in our database. And I just screwed that up, which is going to be to-do. I'll call it a to-do. So it's an item of the to-do list, basically. And again, we're going to place this over here. And what does each item have? An item has or actually, let's call it a task. So that's more understandable, sorry. A task. So user has tasks in the to-do list, okay? And so an item has a task, which is text. This is what you would write on your application, like clean the floor. We are going to save it as text as well. And then the next thing is going to be, we need to check, we need to understand whether a user has completed the task or he has not completed the task. To do that, we are going to have a is completed field. And is completed field is not going to be of type text. There exists another type, which is a yes, no. This type can only be either a yes or a no. So if a task is not completed, it's going to be a no. And if a task is completed, it's going to be a yes. And this way, we are going to be able to filter the items by whether they were completed. Another nice thing to have for our task would be the date when it was completed. Date completed. And the type of this is going to be date. Right? So we're going to, when a user completes something, we're going to say, this is the time and like this is the date that the user has completed this item. And the final thing is that this task right now is not bound to the user in any way. So what this means is right now we've got two separate things in our database. We have got the users and the tasks, but we have no way of figuring out which task belongs to which user. And to do that, we are going to bind each task to a user. So we're going to have a user and the type of it is going to be user. So the way this works is whenever a user creates a task, this field is going to point back to the user. So essentially, the task is going to know who the owner of this task is. And whenever a user is going to log into his app, he's only going to see tasks where the user is he himself, and he will not be able to see tasks of other users because that's just not the point of our application. And just like this, we have created a very, very basic database that's going to allow our app to function. We're going to come back to this and we're going to make it more and more complicated and more functional as we go. All right. Now let's actually implement this database in our application. To do that, we are going to go back to our data types user. So right now we're still missing first. So the first name of every user, which is going to be type text, as you see, create. And the next thing that we're missing is the last. So last. So which is also going to be text. Let's add those. And now you see every user has a first name, last name, email, and those fields. Now we need to create tasks of our to-do list. So we're going to create a new type, which is going to be called task. We are going to create it. You see, these are the default fields, but what we need is the task name, which is going to be a text. What we also need, let's go back to here. We need is completed field. So whether a task is completed or not, is completed. And over here now, these are all the available types. So you can do a text, number, range, date. We need the yes, no type, which I was talking about earlier. Then what we need is the date completed. So when a user has completed a task, which is going to be a date. And then the final thing is we need a user so that we know which user has created the tasks. However, I'm not going to create those just yet. We are going to come back to this a little bit later. So right now, we're just going to assume that all the tasks are shared between all the users to make it simpler. And just like this, we have implemented our very, very basic database. Final thing here maybe is completed by default should be no, because whenever you create a task, then basically it's never completed when you create it. That's the purpose of creating it in a to-do list. So here, this is where you could set your defaults for when things are getting created. Okay, let's go back here. Now we're done with the databases, and now we're getting to the fun part of actually building our mobile app now that we have all of these basic concepts sort of down and understood. Let's now start with the 4 types of mobile views that exist in our editor. So let me actually clean this thing from here. And let's first talk about views. Whenever building with Bubble, if you're familiar with it in traditional setting, you use pages. And pages are located here, and they're actually available to you even if you're just building a mobile app. However, what we're curious or what we need to know are these mobile views. It's a similar thing. It is almost as a page just for mobile. And treat every view as a separate page within your app. So one page that we are going to be building is the dashboard, so the main page. And another page is going to be the to-do list, where we are going to display all of the to-do items. So let's say home is going to be our dashboard, and let's add another page now, which is going to be called to-do _ list, which is going to be the list. Let's create it. Okay, there we have our new mobile view. Now, mobile views have 4 different types that they can have. We can have a scrollable, a non-scrollable, vertical list, and a section list. So let me quickly run you through what those are and why you would use each of them in a certain setting. A scrollable view is when you need to build a page of certain things that is scrollable. So if I start filling this page up just like a crazy man with all of these texts, and let me just simply do this, let me select all of them and just literally copy paste a huge ton of them, you will see this page grows and grows and grows to as much elements as it has. So if I now preview this page, you will see that I can scroll this page infinitely or as much elements as it has. Now, if I would actually make this page now non-scrollable, and if I would refresh the application here, so let's click on to preview, you would see I'm not able to scroll anymore. So even though I have many elements that go beneath the page all the way down, I cannot see them. And this is useful for those pages where you know that you don't have a lot of information, you only need small part of it, maybe like a login page, where you know the user is never going to have to scroll the page. But for this case, it obviously does not work because I have way more things down there. All right, let me actually clean all of this, all this mess that I have made here. And let's go to the next type, which is a vertical list. So a vertical list is essentially a list of things, right? And over here, in here, you can insert multiple things. And this is similar to a repeating group if you know Bubble from before. If you're not familiar with it, this is where you can actually tell the database, okay, get me the things and populate this list with those things. And this is the thing we're going to be using for our to-do list in just a second. And the final view that we've got is the section list. It's the same as list. The only difference is now that you have sections and section headers. So it's a list that is going to be grouped by a certain feature of it. We're going to get to this page as well. Now let's actually start building our list. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put it to this page to vertical list because that's what we want for this interface. The user creates things and then he saves them here and then he can swipe them when he is done with them. Now, before we actually do any manipulations, let's quickly go to our database, to the app data type, and we go to all the tasks, and this is where all of them are contained. And now we're going to create a new entry, so we're just going to create some of the tasks to have. And the task name for this is going to be clean my floor, create, and just like this, we're going to have something to play with. Go to gym, create, new entry is going to be, what else can we do? Grocery, do groceries. I can't spell. Create. And you see, so now you see these things is what is contained in your database. They have a created date, they have a modified date, and they have the task names. So now we have some entries in the database. Okay, let's go back to our mobile view and let's actually populate this list with those tasks. So type of content here. Now we select what thing from our database we want to display in our list. In this case, we want to display tasks. And the data source is basically where you input what if we know we need to display tasks, but what tasks do we actually display? And here we have this beautiful function which is called do a search for. When you click on it, you can search for a specific thing in the database. So now we're going to do a search for task in our database. And if you wanted to, you could add certain filters. We are not going to add them just yet. Right now we want to display every single task that exists in our database to this list. Next, now that we are doing it, each of the list items, so we can actually only edit the first one and the rest gets adjusted automatically, will contain a task. So now we're pulling a lot of tasks, but each of these grids contains only one task. So let's actually reload our page and see that nothing happens. So I preview it. And you see we have three list items over here already. However, why is the name not adjusted? And the reason is, we know we have 3 tasks in our database. They are now contained within these containers, and that's why they are displaying, that's why we see them. However, we now need to adjust this text because this text doesn't know what we want from it. So essentially, we're gonna go here, we're gonna delete this, and we're gonna insert dynamic data. And we're gonna go and current items task. So each list item is gonna have a task. Now we're taking that task, and now we're gonna take its task's name. This way, if I click on to preview again, we will see we have the clean my floor, go to gym, and do groceries displaying properly in our to-do list. Okay, so now we have explored the basic list view, and I have explained sort of what the views are. So let's cover this section off. We are gonna come back to views a bit later again. Now let's actually go and save an item to our database, because if you're a user of such an app, you probably want to add your own stuff to over here. And to do this, I want to add a simple button in the bottom of my screen, which is going to be add item to the list. All right, let's go back to our page, and over here we need to add a certain button here. The way I'm going to do this is, first of all, we can think of it. The list can be infinitely long. Like the list can be so long, and it's going to be a bad user experience if the user has to scroll all the way down to the list to be able to click that button. It's also going to be a bad user experience if you make the button on top, because it's very hard to reach. So what do we actually do here? Well, we want our button to sort of float above the list so that when user scrolls the list, the button is always accessible to him in the bottom part of the screen where it's convenient to do it. And for that, there exists a floating group in Bubble, which is very useful for mobile applications. If I drop it just here, you see just like floats above all the elements. So now let's put it into our app accordingly. First of all, I want to show the safe area so that we see which areas we should probably not touch with our group. Now, the group should float relatively to the bottom. We're just editing the properties of it. Float relative to center, because we want it dead centered. And right now the group is way too big. So let's actually make it full width. So minimal width 320, but if I uncheck this, you see the group instantly becomes full width. And now minimal height of it should be smaller. Let's say 100 pixels. Just like this, I feel like this is a good area for us. We can now color the group with a, let's say, black color. And if we preview, we're going to see exactly where this group is. Just over there. So now we need a button over here that we can add things to it. Now, actually, I'm going to remove the background from it so it's completely transparent, because we don't want anything. Now we're just going to simply drag and drop our button onto the floating group. And we're going to edit its label to add item. And let's preview how this looks like. There we go. However, the button is looks a bit disgusting because it touches both borders. So what I want to do is I want to make it a bit like less, I don't know what the word for it. And to do it, we're just going to go back to our floating group, and we're going to add something called padding. Padding basically adds space where you tell it to add space. So padding on left and right of 20 pixels usually works very well on mobile devices. Let's preview how that looks like. And now you see we have some space here and there. Now probably the button is still a bit too tall, so let's make this floating group a bit smaller in size. Let's make it fixed height, and let's make the height of it, let's say 80. This should do the trick. Cool. And now let's actually add the functionality of adding the items when the button is tapped. To do that, if you click on this button and you go to Appearance, you see that the bubble editor requires us to add a workflow. So let's do that. We're going to add a workflow, and we are going to get brought to the workflow editor with an action being button add item is tapped. So Bubble is essentially asking us, what do I need to do when this button is tapped? And let's now start filling this out. We're going to get a plus icon, and now you see all of the different things that we can do. Now what we want to do is add an item to the to-do list. So we are going to go to data, because we are going to be modifying our database, and we're going to create a new thing in our database. The thing is going to be a task. And let's now we can set different fields of that task. So you see we can either set the date completed, is completed, but we don't need to set those, but we potentially want to set our task name, and let's set it just to simply be test for now. We now have no way of modifying this whatsoever. And so now that that is done, let's preview it. So now when I click this item, we should see another task being added to the to-do list. There we go. We have a task with the name test in our to-do list. And if I go back to the database now, we will see there is one more task, which is test, which was added right now. Cool. The next thing I want to talk about is the mobile preview. Now, I have actually misnamed this before, but let's go to the preview. I've renamed it now. So this is where we have been looking at our app so far, and let's see what things we can do with it. First of all, we can choose the model of our phone, so we need to always make sure to check it on various devices to actually see how it would look like, so that you're not making any bad design decisions. In our case, if I browse through all of those phones, looks quite fine, right? Looks perfect. And what I can also do is I can add this frame of the phone, and I can see how my app looks like on every device. So make sure to always check this, make sure that nothing gets in the way of the top notch, nothing gets in the way of the clock, because otherwise it's going to be a poor user experience. Now let's talk about trailing swipe actions. This is a very native feature to mobile application that does not exist on web, and this is how users are going to be able to add and delete things from our to-do list. So right now we've got this beautiful list, but a user has no way of either completing a task or deleting a task. So let's add this functionality to the list. We're going to go back to our preview, and over here you see, like, if I click on this item, you see a plus here appear and a plus here appear. Those are called swipe actions. So the first thing is we want to ensure that when a user swipes a task gets completed. Let's add those. So we're going to add a swipe action, and you see it immediately gives us this trash can, which is not what we want. We actually want it to be green because the user completes it. Let's change the icon to be check, so that the user completes it. And yeah, there we go. This is actually what we need. And now we need to add a workflow to this action. So let's do that. So when swipe action A is tapped, what we do then is we go in data things. We are going to make changes to a thing this time, because now we want to complete an item in our database. So make changes to a thing. We are going to go to current items task, which is the task that's contained in there. And now we're going to change something about it. And in this case, we're going to change the is completed to yes. This way, user is already able to complete things. And finally, we now need to display to the user that he has completed the task, somehow that he sees that the task is completed. So to do that, let's add a small icon for all the completed tasks here. So I'm going to go and search for icon, and I'm just simply going to drag and drop it to over here, and let's go for a check, just like this. We're going to make it green. There we go. So let's preview how this works right now. Well, right now all of the tasks are completed because, well, we did not actually specify the behavior of this particular icon. So what we want to have is we actually go to layout. The element should not be visible on page load. So by per default, users don't see it. But then there are conditional actions, which is what we need to talk about next. If users go into here, they can, not users, if you go here, then you can specify an element's behavior based on certain conditions. And this is where we want to go. When current items tasks, so when this particular task is completed, so when the task is indeed completed, then we're going to make this element visible. So per default, it's invisible, but if a task is completed, then it's visible. Let's preview how that looks like. So you see the tasks are now not visible. So because there is literally like none of them are completed. If I now go to the database and I modify this one manually and say, yes, you are completed, then you will see over here that it just got completed. And to actually follow up on our swipe action, if I now want to swipe it, just like this, you see the task gets completed. I can also do like this and click here. You see the task gets completed. Now I can actually swipe it again, but nothing happens because it is already completed. Now let's go back to our swipe trailing actions here. So swipe action 1 and here leading swipe actions. So here you also have another parameter which we need to talk about first, is allow full swipe action. So what you have seen now is, first of all, let me uncomplete some of those tasks so I can swipe them again. So not completed. And let's uncomplete this one again. So now, if I want to complete this task, I can swipe it all the way like this, very convenient. But sometimes we don't want that behavior. Sometimes we want it to only have the behavior of swiping here and then the user has to click here. So if you want to block this behavior, then we would go here and disallow the full swipe action. So now, if I first of all update our preview, and if I want to completely swipe it, it does not work. I actually have to swipe and then click here. And this is what the allow full swipe action checkbox stands for. Okay. So let's now add a final thing, which is a delete the task. So if a user has added a task that he did not want to add and he wants to delete it, we're going to add another action here, which we can actually do by just adding here, which is going to have the trash can. Perfect, that's already fine. Let's add the workflow. And for this case, what we're going to do is we're going to go data things, delete thing, and the thing that we're going to delete is the current items task. Let's quickly preview how this looks like. So let me delete this test task. I'm just going to swipe it to the right, and it gets deleted from the database. With that, we have covered the trailing swipe actions. The next thing that I want to cover are sheets. So right now, our to-do app is very, very basic. Like we can actually not modify this test task. We can only add the task with the same name, and it's not really, really useful to us. We actually want to add tasks that contain a certain name. And to do that, on the web version, when this button is clicked, we would probably display some sort of pop-up and then the user can edit the name. On mobile, pop-ups are not really functional or not great. And therefore, there is another element which is called the sheet. So now, whenever a user clicks on this button, what I want to happen is a sheet to pop up. Ask the user, how do you want to name the task? The user names the task and then clicks on to add so that he can add the task with his name. So let's add a sheet. We're just simply going to drag it onto our page, and you see now there is a sheet A. Sheet A. Now so essentially, let's now edit it. We have swipe to close, yes. Block interaction behind sheet, yes. This is all cool. So now the first behavior we want to change is this button. Let's edit the workflow of this button. Let's delete what we had here before, and instead we want to show an element. And the element that we want to show is the sheet A. So now let's see how that looks like in action. Let's preview. Add item. You see the bottom sheet pops out. And now if I want to close it like this, I can. And now we need to put things in here so that users are able to add the task with the appropriate name. So let's get back to editing our sheet. Let's click on it, open, and let's add a simple text first. Name of your task. Double point. And below it, we're just going to add an input. An input allows a user to add information in a text form. So here, type here, yes, this is all good. But again, one thing I want to change here is add gap spacing on every side because this looks ugly. So let's add 20 pixels here, 20 pixels here. Great, this is good enough. So now the user can type something in here. And the final thing is button save task. So add task. There we go. The one thing we see here is that this button is super close to the top element. And to spread them out a little bit, what we can go onto layout and add a gap spacing between elements. So to add some space between them. And let's say we want a space of 20 pixels. But now actually this text is way too far spread out. So let's actually put its minimal height to 0. And now still the text is way too far away from this input, looks ugly. So what we can do is we can now group these elements by selecting them and go group elements in a column. And now you see those are closer together, because if you go to our layout over here and the sheet A where everything is contained, you will see that group A contains the text and the input. And then the next thing is the button add task. Now let's preview how this looks like. So I click on add item, name of your task, I can type it in, and then I can add a task. However, what I still don't like is that we have all of this space here which looks ugly. And therefore we have something called snap points for sheets. So let's go back here. First of all, the first thing I want to do is actually for this group, let's set a top margin so sits a bit lower, so let's set 20 pixels. There we go, looks a bit better. But now all of this space we need to move away. To do that, we're going to click on sheet, go to appearance, and here we've got snap points. So if I set it to large, you see the thing just pops out all the way, full, just literally entire screen. But we can also say fit to content. And this way, our sheet is only going to be as big as our content, which is what we need here. And if I preview this now, and add item, you see it only slides out only there where we need it, and I actually can't pull it up anymore, exactly like we need it. Final thing left to do for us is to add the functionality behind it. So when this button is clicked, we are going to add a workflow to it. We have already done this before. Data things, we're going to create a new thing, we're going to create a task, and now we're going to set its task name. However, in this case, we're actually going to set its name to the input that we have, input A's value. And the final thing we need to probably do is for this input say that this input should not be empty in the parameter field, otherwise people are going to be able to create tasks without a name at all. And now let's actually preview how this entire thing works and whether we can actually finally add a task with a custom name. So there we have our simple app. Let's actually delete this guy. Let's add an item, and the name of our task should be finish this tutorial. Let's add the task, and there we go. The finish this tutorial got added. However, the final thing we have to do is actually clean this and close the sheet once the button is pressed. So let's go back to the workflow editor. Next thing we need to do is first of all hide an element, which is the sheet A, so that it disappears. And another thing is we need to reset an element. We need to reset a group pop-up. And the reason why, actually, let's not reset it first, and let me show you what happens if you do not reset it, so that you understand why I'm doing it. So now let's add an item. The item is going to be GG, add task. It closes, but if I want to add another item, we have the previous name here, which is not convenient for the user. And this is why we are going to reset a group pop-up, which is going to be sheet A. So everything that's contained within the sheet is going to get reset to its basic first initial state. So now, if I add another task, which is called HH, add task, click again, you see the input is empty, and now I can start adding unlimited tasks. Okay, so let's get back to our plan. We have now mastered sheets completely, and now let's master option sets. Option sets are a bit harder to understand, but they're very, very essential for your application, and you need to know what those are and how those work. Let me quickly give you an example of when they're used and how they're used. So right now in our app, we have our database with our users and with our tasks, and the user can create a task. Option sets are sort of like static data type. So if users can be modified by users. So essentially, if a user logs into an app or creates a new user account, a new user is added. A user can create a task. So a user says, okay, I want this task, and it gets created. However, option sets are similar data storage because they store data. However, they're not modifiable by anyone. They're sort of static in your database. Let's go back to our database schema, and over here now I want to categorize tasks by different categories. Let's say a task can be work related, hobby related, or relationship related. And now I need to add these categories so that users can pick between those static categories. The way I do it is I create an option set. So let me put this here, and this is going to be, no, not this. This is going to be category option set. And let's maybe put something like this so that we know that it's a different type. And now every option set per default has a display, and a display is an option set's name, and the type is always text. And for this option set, we actually don't need anything else. So let me go back and create this, and you're going to understand why we're doing this. We're going to skip tutorial. We don't care about this. Essentially, we are going to now create task category option set, and you see display is per default created. Only thing now, we can modify our options that are eligible to us over here. So this is going to be personal, it's going to be work, or it's going to be relationship task. And so these are now our categories of tasks that we have created. They're static. No one can edit these. And now we want to somehow link this back to the task. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a category, and the type of it is going to be the category, or like task category. So essentially, this thing in task now, this parameter or like this attribute in task now contains an option from this option set. Let me add this and let me show you how this works. So we're going to go back to our data types task, and we are going to add the category, and we're going to choose task category option set, create. And now even here you see per default I can select either personal, work, or relationship type of task. So for example, if this finished this tutorial, we can now set it to be personal. Save. Got it. Now I'll quickly add a category for every task, just like this. We're not going to be building the interface yet, because this we are going to be building later in this tutorial, because we are going to get to it in a later stage. So I'm just simply filling out a category for every type super manually. You never do this actually, but it's very useful for this tutorial so that we are not running ahead of ourselves. Because the next thing that I want to show you, we have done the option sets. The next thing that I want to show you is the section list view. Now, right now we had the very basic list here. So, where are we? We are on this page. Let's actually create a new view for ourselves, and we are going to go to do sorted. So we are going to create it. Now, this view is going to be useful for us if we actually want to display our tasks sorted by categories. And to do that, we are going to go for a section list, and a section list is going to allow us to do just that. So let's click on the section list. We are going to put our tasks back in here. As a data source, we're going to do a search for all of our tasks. There we go. And now the final thing we need to do is a section header A. Here we're required to enter a group by. Now we're going to group every task by its category. Type of grouping is going to be exact. And now if I preview this, obviously nothing is going to be happening, because first of all we need to name this section header, and we are going to name it current header is groupings display. So we're going to essentially take the option sets display, which is either personal, work, or relationship, and for each of the list items for this page we're simply going to add current items tasks name. Let me preview the page, and now all of a sudden you see that this list now displays all of our tasks, but they're grouped by their respective category. And this is very useful in certain use cases. I'm not going to be talking about this type of list anymore, because this is not really useful for our particular application, but I did want to throw it in there just in case you need it. So, cool. Now let's continue our application. So I'm actually going to delete this page that I have just created because we do not need it. All right, now that we have covered the section list view, let's get back to our application and let's cover the non-scrollable view. And this is also going to be a good place for me to talk about the login and sign up for users for our application. I'm going to go back to our app and we are going to now create a new mobile view, which is going to be called login. Create, mobile view is created, and this view is going to be non-scrollable. The reason you want to select the non-scrollable view, as I mentioned before, is when you have not a lot of content on the page and you're confident that it's going to fit on every mobile screen to overall just create a better mobile user experience for the guy. And I know for a fact that our login page is only going to have login, sign up, email, password. That's everything that the page is going to have. So that's why I'm selecting the non-scrollable user view. Alright, so actually when I hadn't also gotten us the light because it's been getting very, very dark. Let's start our login page. Drop a text. Again, we are using our styles, so we're gonna go for a heading tool, which is a bit smaller. Gonna go for a center of the screen. We're gonna say log in. Now we need to create fields for our login, so let's add a text, which is gonna be email. Or actually, this is gonna be a sign up page, sorry, my bad. So sign up. Now we're going to have our email. Beneath it, we're going to have input for the email. So just put that there. And the input type, content format, should be an email. Very important to switch that. Next, we're going to add another text. We're going to add another input just below that. That's going to be our password. Or here, so we put password. Let me just type here, this doesn't matter, and the input type should be password, very, very important. Now let's actually group all of these elements in a column. The reason why we are doing this is because we want this column, why are we doing these things? Hey, hello. Okay, there we go. Just group these in a column because we want this column to be in the center of our screen. Like this. Okay, perfect. Now, to do that, we go to here, we click here, and now this is going to center our column in the center of the screen. Finally, we need a button over here, like this, center the button, and finally, for this column that we grouped everything in, we're going to add a padding of 20 pixels, so it looks less ugly. And the last thing is these texts, they should have a 0 minimal height. And the column should have a gap spacing. So this group should have a gap spacing between elements of, let's say, 20 pixels as well. This button should be inside of it. Now let's group this together so that they look prettier. Like this. There we go. And this looks like an appropriate sign up page. Maybe like the button should still be called sign up. This field should not be empty. This field should not be empty. Finally, this literally is how we create this page. That there is nothing more to it. Maybe a final thing I would probably add if I was building it myself is a bottom padding of 40 because I rather prefer my things to be just a bit above the center line of the screen because if they're centered, it looks a bit odd to me personally. Okay, now let's click on the button and let's set it up. We're going to add a workflow to that button. Here, we're going to go to account and we're going to sign the user up. Email is going to be input. And actually, a good thing now to get to is naming things. So now we can rename this input to be email. Because we have now multiple inputs, it's very hard for us to understand which one is which. So by renaming them, when I'm back in the workflow editor, I can go with input, and I know input email is the one I'm looking for. Input email's value, the password is going to be input passwords value. We're just going to remember the emails per default because it's a mobile version as well. So just there. Like that just can be per default there. There we go. We do not want to send any emails to the user. We do not require password confirmation. That is fine for us. Now, the next action we probably want to do is to go to the next page once the user has been signed up. And let's just simply we actually don't have the page yet. Let's create the new mobile view, and this is going to be set name view created. On this view, a user is going to be able to choose his first and last name. We're actually going to copy the design from our login page. So I'm going to just go here. We're going to go copy, and I'm going to go back to the set name page, just simply going to paste it. Make sure the page is not scrollable. Make sure that the content is displayed in the middle of the page. And now I'm going to add details. And here this we will rename to first name. This we will rename to last name. The input name should be renamed to first. The input password should be renamed to last, because those are the things we need to do. Here, this is going to be of type text. This is going to be of type text as well. And the button here should be called continue. Let's just say continue. Perfect. We are going to add a workflow here. And the workflow is going to be when the button is tapped, we are going to go and data things, make changes to a thing. And we're going to make changes to a current user, which is always available. And the things we're going to be changing, two things, the first, the last, and the first is going to be the input first's value. The last is going to be input last's value. This way, we are setting the first last name of the user. And finally, after that is done, we are going to go to view home, which is our default view of the application. Or for now, actually, let's go to the to-do list. Now let's go back to the login page, and here in the workflow editor, we're going to find our button. And after the user is signed up, we're going to go to view set name. Perfect. And now let's test this whole thing in action. We're going to click on preview and see how this works. We see the sign up screen, email. Let me give you my email. Now I have just literally shown you my personal email, but it is fine. Guys, you're not mean to spam me, are you? Yeah, just whatever. Honestly, just use strong password. Sign up. Password saved. Add details. Mark Vasiliev. Continue. There we go. And right now, if we go back to our database and we click on user, we will see that we have a user with email with this first name, with this last name created in our database. Okay, get back to our plan. We have mastered the non-scrollable view. We have mastered the login or the sign-up flow. We have not really done the login flow, but I think that's just going to make the tutorial unnecessarily long. So next we need to talk about privacy rules and about and extend our database. So let me quickly show you our next problem that we encounter with our application. Well, first of all, I want to find myself on the correct page when I preview it, which is the to-do list, which I want to preview. If I go here now, I, as a signed up user, as Mark Vasiliev, see all of the tasks that all the users have created, which is a bad thing. And that's, remember when we were starting our database, we had this user field here, and this user field made a task belong to a specific user. So let's actually implement this first. I'm going to go to tasks, data types, and now we're going to create a field which is called user, which is going to be of the type user. So we're going to attach them together, create. Now we have the user, and now we see for all of these tasks, there is no user there. So let's actually keep them in the database though. So me as my current user, I should not be able to see all of them there. So let me quickly click on preview again, because they do not belong to me. So what I will do is over here, on the vertical task list, when we are searching for tasks, so when we're pulling the tasks from the database, I'm going to add a constraint, and the constraint is going to be user equals current user. This means that the tasks that I will be able to see are only the tasks which I have created myself and not those of other users. Let me preview how this looks like. There we go. I don't see any tasks because those tasks do not have a user or they were not created by me. And if I now actually start creating a task, GG add task, well, nothing happens because, well, when the task is created, let's go now to our workflow editor. Here, when we create a task, we should also set the user of the task to its current user. So now if I do this thing again, so let's go quickly, GG, add, now we see a task there, we add another task, there we go, now it works. Right, next thing we need to talk about in Bubble.io are privacy rules. Because right now, my data is not secured from other users. Privacy rules allow you to put hard restrictions on what data a user has access to. Even though right now the application is built in a sort of secure way where when I can only see my own tasks, we still want to add an extra layer of security on top of it so that other users are not able to see the tasks of other users. And the way we do this is in this privacy tab. So now I see all the types or all the data types, user and task. And for our app, we're only going to take care of the task now. We're going to define a new rule, and this is going to be called self. So what we're going to put here is when current user is this task's user. So when I'm the owner of the task, I'm allowed to see, I'm allowed to find this task, and I'm allowed to view everything about that task. But everyone else should not have access to my own tasks. And this way, just right now, we have literally just secured our data types, our tasks from other users who might want to somehow hack them or see them. For the sake of these tutorials, we're not going to cover any more privacy rules, but just remember, whenever you set up a database in Bubble, always set your privacy rules as strict as possible, so as few people have access to data as possible, and make sure that people who should not have access to sensitive data don't have it in this privacy tab. Okay, now that that is covered, let's go back to our editor. And the next thing I want to add is a tab bar, because remember we created two pages, the to-do list page and the home page. So now I want to somehow navigate between those pages, and the way apps usually do it is with a tab item. So the bar like this. And now if I go back to our to-do list page, I will also click include as tab item, and you see this tab now pops here. And also this button I notice now is way too high, so let's actually modify this and make it to simply fit height to content, just like that, and give it a bottom padding of 10 or 20. Perfect. Now let's modify these. So the to-do list should probably have an icon of a list, like this. Perfect. And the home should probably have a house or home. Yeah, perfect. And if I now preview my application, I can now navigate between the two pages by using the app bar. Or not, because yeah, there we go. It's a bit slow. The preview is a bit slow on the computer, but essentially we are able to do just that. Or not. Yeah, the preview is lagging a bit on the laptop. There we go. So now we have mastered it. There is literally nothing else to the tab bar. Simply for every page, when you click on here, you can either include it or not include it, and that's about it. There is nothing else to it. We have mastered it. Now the scrollable view. Let's actually build out our homepage, and our homepage is going to be a scrollable view. What the heck do we even want on our homepage? Now let's get creative, and first of all, let's put it to scrollable. First of all, let's say your next task. Let's just display one task for a user that he needs to complete next. So let's put a text, let's put it to heading 3 and say next up. Boom. And just beneath it, we're gonna put this, which is gonna do a search for tasks, and we're obviously going to search for tasks where the user is the current user, so we're only getting those tasks, and we're just simply going to display the first item's task name. So if I now preview the page, you see next up is GG. Let's also, by the way, group everything in a column, and let's add a 20 padding on every side so it looks pretty. just like this. Let's preview again. So next up, I need to do the GG task. Maybe we want to add another section now. So let's duplicate that, drag it down just to be inside of the group as well. But come on, just here. Nope, not yet. There we go. Let's give it a top padding of 40 so it stands out. And this can be task suggestions. So in this case, I want my task suggestions to be sort of like a thing where I get inspired by other tasks. And there is a thing called horizontal list on mobile. I'm going to add it here, and you see the list goes to the side. So all of the tasks go to that direction. And here we need to fill it up with some content. And let's actually create the content that we are going to fill the list out with. We are going to go for app data, and we are going to create a new type, which is going to be a task suggestion. Create. We're going to create a field which is going to be task name, which is going to be a text. Okay, cool. And then we're going to create another field which is going to be its description. Cool, we create that. Go to app data, and now let's just put some task suggestions in. So for this one, it's going to be clean the floor. And here we're going to be so cool to clean the floor. Cool. Now let's another one. Let's add go to gym. Yes, go to the gym. And let's do another one, a third one, which is going to be jump. Go up and jump. Okay, and so these are going to be the task suggestions that are suggested to every user when they sign up. And so when I go into horizontal list, I can populate it with these task suggestions. Task suggestion, data source. We are going to do a search for a task suggestion. We are not going to get any constraints because we're going to search for everything. So now every grid of this list contains a task suggestion. As a list heading, we're going to simply select current items task suggestion task name. And this is going to be its description, current sales task suggestion description. You see now this overflows, which is not cool at all. So we are gonna, this element is, okay, it's fitting height to its container. So let's actually check out how this looks like. Okay, so clean the floor, go to gym, and I should be able to scroll this list to the side. Horizontal list. Okay, so my preview is glitching, but you would normally be able to scroll this list to your right. And there we go. This is how we master the scrollable page. And obviously I have shown you the scrollable page. So now if you wanted to go absolute bonkers and just duplicate them as much as we want, because our page is so huge, and now to preview the page, we will see that the page is, well, there we go. Okay, sure, now there we go. So now the list is scrollable to the left, the list is scrollable to the bottom, and each of them are scrollable there, right? And this is why we create a scrollable page, when the page is large and we need it. Okay, like this, we have just mastered the scrollable view, we have mastered the horizontal list, and let's now talk about properties. And floating groups we have actually covered before already. Let's talk about properties. Now, let's get back to our to-do list. And right now we can add an item, and remember like how I wanted to add a category, but then we did not quite get there. So now let's add the category to every single task via our flow. We go to the list, we go to our sheet, which is not visible, let's make it visible. And now we need some sort of selector for our category. And now that we have mastered our horizontal lists, we are actually gonna add a horizontal list just right there. And this horizontal list is going to be populated with task category. So we're going to take data not from the database, but from the option set. We're just simply going to say all task category, go into there. We are going to delete this text because we genuinely don't need this. We are going to make this fixed height. This is definitely way too large for what we need it to be. So this is way too big. We need it to be smaller. You're not gonna make it fixed width. We are gonna make it fixed height though. We're gonna make it 30, maybe a 40. Ah, that's too big. Let's do 50. Oh my gosh, 50. That's about right. Let's do 60. Okay, that should be good. And list item, we are gonna rename this to current items task category. Display. Let's preview this. So now when I add an item, I can select one of these categories here. Now they still look a bit disgusting, to be fair. So let's try to remove this and see how this performs. But now they're going to be too big. Yeah, they are too big. So we need to make it, we do need to make it fixed height. Does this? Yeah, we do need to make this element fixed height. And let's try to give it like a height of 50 so that it looks somewhat appropriate. Let's add item, there we go. Now those categories we can now select from. The one thing I still don't like is that these two are not too far from each other, so we're simply gonna group them together in a column container, like that. This is not gonna be, oh, there we go, there we go. Why is it 150? Okay, just like this. Let's see how this looks like. Add item. Oh yeah, okay, so this horizontal list needs to have a minimal height of 50, which is the height of our boxes. Final thing, let me now first of all preview whether it looks like properly or not. There we go. And so now when a user selects the name and clicks onto one of these, the next task that he creates should have that category. But how do we save this choice of user clicking on a certain thing and then saving it into our app? How do we do it? To do this, we need variables. Or in Bubble mobile, there are called properties. A property is a thing that is contained somewhere on the page that is not stored to a database. It's like sort of a temporary thing that you need to store. And here we are gonna add a property which is gonna be category selection, and it's going to be a dynamic value, and the field type is going to be task category. Added. And now we have it. So whenever a user selects one of those, we are going to set this variable to that particular task category, and then when a user creates the task, that task category, the task is going to have that task category. I'm going to show you how it's done. So basically, first things first. Whenever a user clicks onto this thing, we're going to add a workflow. We're going to set property of a current view, and we are going to set the category selection, as it's the only one, to this list items, to current items task category, and this way we are now able to change that variable. Okay, cool. So now a user is able to select a task category for his particular task, but he's not able to see which one is selected. To do that, let's actually now modify this thing with a conditional argument and say that when the property, so when to do lists category selection is current items task category. So when the selected thing matches the thing that the user is currently looking at, let's actually make the border of it, border style of borders is going to be solid, and the border color of all borders is going to be changed to the primary color. And also another thing I want to do is let's change this to 2 so it's a bit more visible, so the width of the border is bigger. So now I'm going to add an item, and you see I'm now able to select a thing. You see? So whenever I click here, this thing gets pushed to our variable, and because we have made this conditional argument here, that whenever the variable matches the thing that's there, it's gonna color the border. It colors the border, just like this. And so finally, the final thing is to modify our task creation process. When this button is clicked, let's edit it. So when the task is created, the tasks category is gonna be to-do lists category selection. Okay, perfect. We can preview this now. And now let's add an item, which is going to be personal task. And I'm going to click on personal. I'm going to add it. And now if I go here, go back to our database, go to all of our tasks, we see that we have a task which was created by me. Task is personal task and the category is personal because now we have selected and set it to that. Okay, let's go back to our plan. We have mastered properties now. Final thing that is left for us, or two things more actually, and then you have literally mastered 80% of mobile editor, is first of all using the native features. So mobile does have native features, which is sometimes opening a camera or lightly vibrating the device, and they're going to be added to Bubble as we sort of go, because this is a very early stage of the mobile editor. But to open them or to use them, we would go to this workflow editor as we usually do, and here we have this native mobile tab where we are able to access those actions. So for example, we can either open the phone's camera or open the camera library, and if we click this, the user can then select either single or multiple photo, and in the next step we can actually, so if I let's say want to create a thing, or like let's say I want to create a task and I want to like set the photo, I can refer back to the result of it and set it to the selected picture by the user in this workflow. All right, so this is that, super simple. That's done in the workflow editor. And the very final thing for us is to talk about deployment of our application. So on web version of Bubble, you would simply click here, there is a button to deploy your app and deploy it. However, on mobile, you actually can't do that. You need to push it to the App Store. And to do that, we need to set appropriate settings of our app. You can actually do it straight from the editor. What you need to do is you need to go onto mobile in your settings. Let me move myself out of the way. Here we would fill out our app display name, which would be to-do list. We would put our app icon, and we would add all of these sort of things that are needed here. Then for Apple Store, we need to fill out these fields, and for Android Store, we need to fill out those fields. Now, filling those out is actually not very complicated, and I genuinely feel like everything that has been said on the internet already about this, you literally need to create an account with Apple and then find your Bubble ID, Team ID. You would need to put your key ID, issuer ID, and private key. So those are basically keys that you can literally copy paste from your Apple developer account to Bubble. And once you have done that, you're able to click this button and deploy your app to the App Store. Thanks for watching this tutorial. I tried to make it super quick, but in-depth enough for you to be able to build your first mobile app. There are like a lot of features in Bubble that are left for you to explore, so feel free to go and explore by yourself. It's impossible for me to explore everything there is, and every single app is going to require a specific use case, specific feature. So yeah, go explore by yourself and enjoy building with Bubble, and see you in the next video.